Meeting. We are convened as of 5:33 p.m. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. During tonight's meeting, we are providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated for anyone who would like to access a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of the meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I would now like to call the roll. Director Akiri.
Here.
Oops, sorry. Treasurer Banker.
Present.
Director Bouquet.
Present.
Director Busick is absent. He'd sent me a note, excused. Director Chandler.
Present.
Director Geisinger.
Present.
Director Gutschenritter.
Present.
Present.
Director Harwick.
Here.
Director Larson. Here. Director Nicholson.
Here.
Director Pagliari. Director Ruscia.
Here. Also, we are still in a practice session on Zoom.
Board staff.
It shows.
Okay. Director Whitmore.
Present.
And Director O'Keefe is present. Okay. With 13 present and 2 absent and excused, we have a quorum. Next is our public participation period, was open to anyone who'd like to address the board. As we have both in-person and remote attendees, in-person comments will go first, followed by those who are participating remotely. For those attending in person, please come up to the podium. Your name is called. If you're not already signed up to speak and would like to do so, please approach the podium when I call for additional speakers. For those attending virtually, if you'd like to speak and have not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you're dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing. If any speaker has documentation or reference material for the board, or any member of the public would like to submit written comments or would like to be contacted regarding their public comment, please email our board office at rtd-directors@rtd-denver.com. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names and will have up to 2 minutes to provide their comments. Mr. Kroll, do we have any speakers signed up?
We have no speakers present at the meeting location to provide public comment, and there are no individuals online who have indicated a desire to provide public comment. We did receive one emailed public comment regarding the conversation you all will have tonight related to structural deficit.
Okay, thank you. If there's anybody in the room that wanted to approach the podium, seeing none, okay. Moving along. With no participants in the queue, we'll close public participation. There is one recommended action on tonight's agenda, and that is the drug and alcohol policy. Seems appropriate before we talk about the deficit. For Board of Directors to approve an updated drug and alcohol policy, Section 2 FTA drug and alcohol policy. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Banker and Chandler. GM CEO Johnson, would you introduce your team as well as introduce the topic?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good evening, all. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. We are before you tonight to present the updated drug and alcohol policy, particularly Section 2, pursuant to input received from the Federal Transit Administration. This is a regulatory requirement as we move forward. We do have Chief People Officer here, Lily Tran, with support from her staff, Travis Bussey, to present this item. So with that, I will yield the floor to Ms. Tran. Thank you.
Thank you, GM CEO Johnson. Good evening, Chair O'Keefe and Directors. Lily Tran, Chief People Officer. I'm joined today by Mr. Travis Bussey, who is our Manager of DOT Compliance and Office Services. We are here to present the updated drug and alcohol policy and request board adoption of Section 2 as required by the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, regulations. As background, in 2025, the FTA conducted a routine audit of RTD's drug and alcohol program. As part of that audit, they identified several areas in our existing policy that either omitted or misstated required elements under Regulation 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 655. They also highlighted sections under RTD's own authority that were not clearly differentiated, which is also required by regulation. During the audit, RTD provided the FTA with a fully revised draft policy built using the FTA's Policy Builder tool. The FTA has reviewed and approved this updated policy contingent on board adoption, which is required under Regulation 49 CFR Part 65, Section 15. The revised structure includes an umbrella policy for all employees, as well as distinct sections for FTA covered and Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, covered employees. We also met and conferred with ATU Local 1001 on the updates, and I just want to publicly acknowledge our collaboration with Mr. Lance Longenbahn. We're here today because the board is being asked to adopt Section 2 of the updated drug and alcohol policy, which covers employees who are subject to the FTA regulations. This section includes all required elements fully aligned with the Code of Federal Regulations and reflects the audit findings identified during the FTA audit. So approval of just Section 2 is required for RTD to remain in compliance and to finalize the audit resolution. So with board adoption today, RTD will formally adopt the updated policy. Staff will immediately distribute the finalized policy to all covered employees as required by regulation. So the action requested is board approval of just Section 2, the FTA covered employee portion.
Thank you, Chief People Officer Tran. Is there any discussion? Oh, is there any discussion? Already had a motion. Okay, seeing none. This is almost remarkably too easy. The world could be ending, I guess. Thank you very much. Oh, we didn't vote. So are there any no votes? And seeing none. Anyone online that is a no? Give you a second. Okay, we're going to call this passed unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to use a little chair's prerogative here for a second. Board Office Director Kroll tells me I can reopen public comment anytime I want to during a meeting, which seems like a remarkably weird power. But Saif Mustafa is welcome to come up to the podium. He came down here to speak to the board today, so we're going to take his comments and then we'll exit back out again. Thank you. Go forward.
Good evening. My name is Saif. I'm a daily writer of the 15 and 15L. And today I'm here to tell you that I'm not asking you to cancel the links. I'm asking you to run both. Keep the 15 and 15L as local and limited routes and add links as an express option. Construction started with little to no warning. One day, normal. The next day, chaos. Stops moved, shelters torn up, and then benches removed. Riders with disabilities, low vision, and language barriers were left to figure it all alone. No announcements on the buses, no multilingual outreach, and just few papers and a few buildings and notifications on Google Maps in Apple and English. Most riders still don't know the 15 and 15L is being eliminated. They think it's just moving to the middle lanes. I follow RTD closely, and even I barely found out. Most riders think the 15 and 15L is just moving to the middle lanes. They have no idea it's being eliminated entirely. You don't gamble with your most used route when ridership is already down a third. If links falls, there's no fallback. 15 and 15L would already be gone. It's not strategic, it's reckless. The ridership drops means less fare revenue, more cuts, even few riders. It's a death spiral. Link stops are more spaced out than the 15 and 15L. That means longer walks in Colorado winters for elderly riders, disabled riders, and anyone who lives or works between stops. For someone with limited mobility, a faster bus they can't reach isn't an improvement. Links is not a local route, it's an express route. Call it what it is, a 15X, but there's no local 15 left behind. You're eliminating local service on Colfax entirely and calling it an upgrade. The 15 and 15L aren't just a route. It's one of the oldest and most trusted in the system. Generations have depended on it. The number matches Colfax coordinate grid, 1500 north. That's intuitive and helps riders learn the city. Replacing it with links erases that logic. Numbers and letters are universal. Links is not. Choice riders don't avoid the 15 and 15L because of the bus. They avoid it because of the Colfax. Links will magically turn Colfax into a wonderful land. The shirtless guy doing yoga outside of the 7-Eleven will still be there. A prettier bus on the same chaotic street is still a bus on Colfax. You're spending millions chasing riders who won't come while making life harder for the riders who actually depend on you. Other cities and transit agencies who run BRT and local buses on the same corridor, Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle, Portland, if they can do it, so can Denver and RTD. Denver already has better transit than most comparable cities, and there's no excuse. You don't cannibalize your most used local route to build BRT. You add BRT as an additional service. You've proven you can make certain decisions. You've kept Route 37 alive weekdays only hourly because it serves a need. You try truly useless routes like 41 and 157. You know how to evaluate what works. The 15 and 15 will work. You're choosing to eliminate it anyway. This isn't about Denver only. Aurora's gladiators get left behind too. Links gets dedicated lanes and priority in Denver. In Aurora, it's just a rebranded bus with less familiarity and no real BRT features. But the 15 and 15 are being eliminated everywhere. Our riders lose local service and get nothing real in return. Links is only being built on the east leg of Colfax from Broadway to Yosemite. The product that's already less congested. If this is truly about making Colfax faster, why aren't you building on the whole of Colfax instead of just a fraction? This isn't about city, it's about branding and on the easiest stress to build. An example of the 15 and 15 rider is my mom. My mom is an Iraqi immigrant with limited English. The 15 and 15 are the only routes she knows. If Links replaces them, she cannot ride alone. I would have to go with her every time. You're not just changing the bus route, you're taking away her independence. Thousands of riders like her will be left behind. What I'm asking for is simple. Keep the 15 and 15 long links that's on alongside them as an express option. Add, don't replace, more options, better coverage, no one left behind. The cost of running the 15 and 15 alongside is minimal compared to shutting it down and dealing with the fallout. You have the chance to do this right. Please don't gamble your most important round on a bet that doesn't need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Saif. Okay, we will reclose public comment. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for a little accommodation there. Okay, so we have one discussion item this evening, and it is closing the structural deficit. I know I've said this before. I know everyone here well knows it. There is no other room that is going to address this challenge. It is this board and this management team that is going to have to find a path forward. I'm very confident that we can do that in a way that is as respectful to our riders, our employees, and our taxpayers as possible. I look forward to the presentation. This is the beginning of a conversation. I know there are a lot of reports about decisions being made. Being the person who gets to call the vote, I don't remember calling any of them, so there's not been a decision made yet. We are evaluating options right now, and I hope that we have the widest range possible so we can choose the best path. I'm going to turn it over to you, GM CEO Johnson, and the members of your team.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO, and thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion and really appreciate your comments, and we'll amplify those throughout. The intent here this evening is to ground all of us in the path forward and what might be most prudent for this organization. I want to ensure that everybody that's listening in, that's assembled, recognizes that people are the main crux to all of this. We are people moving people and people serving people, and quite naturally, these are hard decisions as we go forward, recognizing from a historical vantage point that the leadership team and I have been convening and meeting about different strategies relative to where we sit since September of 2025 as we were preparing for the 2026 budget. So just wanted to amplify that as we go forward. And I assembled a Tiger team, and we have been working collectively and quite naturally, Mr. Chair, before you were Mr. Chair and a member on this board, you would put forward some remarks relative to what was happening from the leadership team vantage point and looking at management positions and those that weren't on the front lines. And I sat in the same seat and shared with you that that was in the works. So this basically just amplifies that going forward. So if we could go to the next slide. What the team and I plan to do today, Ms. Mackey will outline for you the March 17th study session summary to bring us all to where we are currently and the genesis of where we are today. The deficit elimination strategies I will speak to, not only as it relates to RTD, but just more or less sharing that this isn't indigenous to RTD. This is something that we are seeing nationwide with other transit agencies. We'll talk about the fiscal sustainability of the organization and the aspect of how paramount that is to anything that this agency does with its core business, which is transit service delivery. Then talk about the deficit elimination strategy, staff recommendations, and that's operative there in the sense that these are merely recommendations and we're seeking guidance from all of you. This is not any type of action item, but in relationship to where we sit, the team and I need to have some understanding of where the board is, so then that will help chart our path as we go forward, and that basically falls into the next item, which is the decision needed a next step. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, and I'll yield the floor to Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer. The first is a recap of the March 17 session on the 2027 budget and service considerations. I will show a few important slides again so you have these materials readily available for your reference. The bars in this chart reflect revenue and the line reflects expense. When the line is higher than the bars, it means that there's a deficit or a decrease in net position, which you can think of as a loss. In 2019, RTD was already in a difficult deficit position with a $127 million loss. It was only due to the federal pandemic relief that the agency has had a surplus in recent years. Expenses are going up faster than revenue, which is why the agency is facing a structural deficit and why these need to be brought back into alignment. This is a view of the change in net position, or loss in red and gain in blue, going back to 2019. At this level, the deficit is not a performance issue, it's a viability issue, and the current model is clearly not sustainable. Transit agencies nationwide are facing similar pressures, but RTD's gap is significant and does require decisive action. This shows the 5-year financial forecast, and the message here is that to balance the 2027 budget, the agency needs to reduce the deficit by about $215 million. Revenues are expected to grow over the next several years, while expenses also grow, but at varying rates depending on operating needs, debt service, and capital projections. When we look specifically at 2027, one of the most important numbers in this chart is that operating expenses, excluding the East Colfax BRT project, needs to come in around $790 million to get close to balance. The forecast also shows the impact on reserves, which are not the same as cash, and they're largely board-directed amounts. Even with improvements starting in 2027, reserves are under pressure, and we must protect them to maintain financial stability and comply with fiscal policy requirements. As we look at fare box recovery over time, the downward trend, the black line, it's the downward trend in the fare box recovery. It aligns closely with periods of significant service expansion. Between 2013 and 2020, RTD opened multiple new corridors, the W line, A line, B line, R line, G line, and eventually the N line. And each of those expansions added substantial new operating cost into the system. Layered on top of that, fare policy changes and the pandemic further compressed fare revenue, which means the cost of expanded service has played a central role in the long-term decline in fare box recovery and the structural system cost. And next, I will turn it back to GM CEO Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. As we go to the next slide, Recognizing that we talked about our structural deficit, and Ms. Mackey has outlined for you how this came to fruition, considering that back in 2021 and then additional monies in early 2022, the 3 tranches of COVID relief funds helped bridge the gap that we were already facing, I would say basically going into 2019 and 2020. Where we are not conditionally, where we are currently is that the operating expenses, Ms. Mackey indicated, is highly elevated compared to our revenue. And basically bringing that in line would be $790 million relative to what our operating expenses should be. What we have before you are some agencies that we leverage from a financing perspective relative to peer agencies. And you can see here in this table, we have RTD and we have this circled, recognizing that our operating expense as we compare to DART, TriMet, MARTA, and SEPTA, that we are at $1.3 billion relative to our operating expense. And we can see the change in our net position or the loss. We're talking about $227 million, which is basically an 18% differential. In comparison, you can see DART, and I know most of you follow the transit news, and there's been a lot of things that have been happening there relative to the change in their net position, but there's a lot of different factors as it relates to the services that they provide to the neighboring cities and things of the like. What's notable is that with SEPTA, we saw the doom and gloom last year, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania basically leveraged some monies that they had with FHWA and some other revenues, and basically provided a bailout to that agency. As we progress to the next slide, and this is just to orient you all, as we've been having discussions, we're having this intentionally in public session because this is a critical issue, and we've received a lot of media coverage as it relates to where we stand. As we look at the approximate $250 million deficits, to the remarks that Ms. Mackey made, because there are certain fluctuations relative to where we sit, as we heard earlier in our Finance and Planning Committee when we received the report from CU Leads on various forecasts relative to sales and use tax, and that's roughly 70% of our budget, that we have to ensure that we're taking responsibility to do everything in our power that we can to shore up our expenses so they're in line with the revenue streams and the revenue more or less that we receive. It's important to note that as we look at where we are collectively, and there's a myriad of different suggestions, and as a follow-up to the former meeting, we are going to look at those pursuant to the request that Committee Chair Banker put forward. But when we look at that overarching pie chart of the 70% relative to sales and use tax, and we have 20% as it relates to grant funding, which primarily is coming from the state with some new revenue being generated through SB 230. We have 5% that is tied to fares, and recognizing that we can't just solely raise fares. We provide a public service that is heavily subsidized. And while we can look at some things to bridge that gap, when we talk about the elasticity with everything going forward, that would be a difficult fix relative to the agency. Just going forward to the next slide, in comparison to the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District that serves 4 counties in the greater Bay Area out of the 9, this is a problem that has been persistent as well. And just as we have done here, BART staff have looked at shortening train consists. Traditionally, BART runs heavy rail. They have 10-car consists. What they've done is shorten those consists to 6 cars, whereby there's a savings relative to the people power and basically the mechanical aspect of keeping their assets in a state of good repair. They've frozen wages, as we have done here at this agency, recognizing what we did going into 2026, reduced service increases and consolidated office space. If we go to the next slide, this is another example of the Alameda Contra Costa Transit District that serves the East Bay within the San Francisco Bay Area. And once again, $200 million on which they have done their due diligence to look at various aspects of renegotiating contracts, looking at their people power, making some adjustments relative to that environment with their people, and long-term service restructuring as well. That gets back to the point of Director Chandler, whereby she spoke of the comprehensive operational analysis, because that's exactly what AC Transit did do. Moving forward, we have the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency that serves primarily as a surface transportation department for the city and county of San Francisco, and their transit arm is the Municipal Railway. Same thing as you look at Muni workforce reductions, redesigning service and operational efficiencies. Next slide, Caltrain that solely runs commuter rail. There's been the same thing, and I'm showing these just to showcase that we're not in this alone, but we have to do our due diligence as we move forward. And lastly, if I could speak, I'll round out with TriMet that's in the Pacific Northwest that serves the greater Portland area. This is more in alignment with where we are currently considering that there's 26 transit agencies within the Bay Area, and they're working collectively, but TriMet, relative to where they sit, doing the same thing relative to looking at service reductions and things of the like, considering that the vast majority of service is baked into a schedule, considering that's the core business function of that entity. With that, I'll yield the floor back to Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. This section reinforces that our financial challenge is structural and not momentary. Expenses, particularly operations, have grown faster than revenues, and without sustained corrective action, the deficit compounds year over year. Here we show the core issue. In 2025, our expenses exceeded revenues by about $227 million. Even with improvements from earlier actions, the imbalance remains significant. And this is why we need multi-year structural solutions rather than incremental adjustments. The revenue forecast was revised down in March, reducing expected sales and use tax collections by $78 million over the 5-year window. For 2027 alone, that's about $14 million impact to revenue, cash, and RTD's deficit. This increases the need for corrective action. These projections show unrestricted cash and investments going back to 2020 and illustrate the risk of inaction. Without eliminating the deficit, unrestricted cash and investments drop to near zero in 2027 and below restricted levels in 2028 based on current projections. Even modest delays or additional commitments accelerate the decline. This makes rapid deficit elimination essential to preserving liquidity and system resilience. Layering non-service deficit strategies, the orange dashed line raises accordingly so you can see what that looks like. This next view layers on a $62 million reduction in service delivery expense, which could be approximately 20% of service. Note that this adjustment gets the 2030 unrestricted cash and investments projection above $0 in 2030. And then lastly, here we have layered on a $102 million reduction in expense directly related to service, which would be expected to be about 36% reduction. Notice that looking out to 2028 through 2030, we would still project to have significantly less unrestricted cash and investments than we have today and had back in 2020. For the board's edification and upon request, we have also provided a view of the estimated impact of layering on cash outlays expected for the potential of joint service. The purple line is with joint service, and then the orange, blue, and green lines have been lowered accordingly. This table quantifies those cash pressures across the forecast horizon with the goal here of transparency and accountability in these numbers. Without deficit reduction, the unrestricted cash goes negative starting in 2028, given current expenditure projections. With deficit elimination, RTD would stabilize cash and maintain some financial flexibility. Next, I will show a view of the trend and projection for net position. Net position is basically RTD's financial health score. It's the difference between everything the agency owns and everything the agency owes. If you think about it like a household, your house, car, and savings are your assets, your mortgage, credit cards, and loans are your liabilities, so the net position is what's left over after you subtract what you owe from what you own. For RTD, it tells us how strong our balance sheet is and how much flexibility we have and how well we can maintain our system over time. The bottom line of the statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position, commonly known as the income statement, is that decrease in net position or loss. And as you know, this was $282 million in 2024, and the preliminary unaudited financial results for 2025 have this number at $227 million. That impacts the net position on the balance sheet directly. So the red sections at the bottom are the restricted net position. The blue is the net investment in capital assets, and the green is the unrestricted net position. So the gray bars on the right side are a projection of what this total amount, the total net position, will look like in coming years without any action. It's important to note that declining investment in capital assets does indicate reduced reinvestment in the system, increasing long-term asset condition and safety risk. So again, layering on as before, non-service deficit strategies, this is what net position would look like in the future. Adding a layer of a $62 million service reduction, which would be about 20%, it would look like this. And then finally layering on a $102 million reduction in service, which would be about 36%, would look like this. Eliminating the deficit in 2027 allows us to make strategic and not reactive decisions. Delays would likely force a larger, abrupt set of cuts later, increasing borrowing costs and undermining RTD's long-term planning. Acting now really does preserve more stability and credibility. And the key takeaway here is that for 2027, the board will still have choices. By 2028, the agency would likely be managing more by consequences. Debt refinancing is a liquidity tool, and we received this question last time we met, so we included this information in here. It's a liquidity tool, but it's not a deficit solution. Most options that we have for refinancing provide minimal improvement to net position and some increase long-term costs. We can use these tools tactically, but they cannot replace the need to address underlying operating imbalances. Just for your edification here too, RTD has historically managed debt very effectively, saving $529 million in net present value over the past decade and issuing 5 rounds of new financing. And that strong history does position the agency well, but past savings cannot offset today's structural deficit. Next, I'll discuss the structural deficit elimination strategy in a bit more detail. This slide lays out the multi-year approach. In 2025, staff focused on non-service savings opportunities that you might characterize as more of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. In 2026, the approach is focused on deeper coordinated financial planning across departments, board alignment, communications internally and externally, as well as restructuring. Staff worked diligently to identify as many savings opportunities as possible, and there is at this point limited remaining opportunity outside of operations. For 2027, we must propose service reductions to close the gap. This multi-year approach is intentional, phased, and designed to minimize disruption while restoring financial health. This slide highlights the breadth of contract reductions identified across the organization. These include scaling back security and public safety contracts, sunsetting several IT managed services agreements, and reducing advisory, communications, and legal support contracts. We also trim facilities and civil rights consulting work in this view. Altogether, these changes represent roughly $56 million in sustainable non-service savings, reflecting about 34 primary actions. In addition, the agency identified vacancies, overtime reduction opportunity, trimming back on materials, training, and software tools, and scaling down multiple operational support programs. Staff also identified select capital replacements to defer or cancel, as well as reducing non-critical initiatives such as certain HR programs, sales outlets, and community engagement activities. These approximately 82 primary actions represent the near-term maximum feasible reductions outside of direct service delivery, and they are essential to minimizing the level of service reductions needed for 2027. These are illustrative scenarios that you've seen before, showing what the different levels of reduction could achieve financially. There really is near infinite optionality to reduce the deficit, and these reflect really just two primary scenarios, not discrete options. The recommended scenario that we discussed previously is the approximately 20% reduction at $62 million, with an alternative being deeper reductions if external funding does not materialize. Combining revenue increases and cost reductions, RTD can achieve the targeted $215 million deficit elimination. The structure is clear. It's $30 million in baseline revenue increase, potential $40 million from Clean Transit Enterprise funding, and then cost reductions, including approximately $62 million in service adjustments, coupled with $56 million in contract modifications, and about $38 million in realignment attrition and workforce reduction and vacancy eliminations. This view summarizes how we recommend closing the deficit: $84 million from non-service actions, at least $62 million from service reductions, $30 million in revenue growth, and potentially $40 million in CTE that could materialize in 2027. All right, staff would like to provide a recommendation for your consideration next. After eliminating the structural deficit in 2027, as you know, the long-term pressures do continue to build. The long-range financial plan shows operating cost, debt service, and capital needs all rising faster than revenues through the next decade. A critical call-out, one we first highlighted with the Finance and Planning Committee in 2025, is that the large unfunded state of good repair gap begins in 2031, and that gap reflects aging assets, deferred capital, and the scale of reinvestment required to maintain a safe and reliable system. It cannot be closed through operating efficiencies alone. And this is why staff recommends pursuing a ballot measure in 2028, not only to rebuild net position and restore liquidity, but also to ensure we're positioned to meet those significant state of good repair needs starting in 2031. I will now turn it back to GM CEO Johnson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mackey. So recognizing what we just heard from Ms. Mackey, what we're trying to do here from a staff's perspective is to fully eliminate the current deficit in 2027. More to the point, as we talk about the 20% versus the 36% on the previous slide, there were arrows at the bottom. We're seeking guidance from the board. It's not, those were illustrative in the sense of discerning what might be plausible, but if the board decided to go in either direction, less or more, that's totally within your purview. We're just seeking guidance, more or less, and outlining what we have to face should a decision not be made about the path that we would need to take going forward. More to the point, I would like to share that we have had great discussions as it relates to the Clean Transit Enterprise. Just this morning, had a meeting with the executive director. Chair O'Keefe participated in that meeting along with representation from CDOT, chief of staff as well, and recognizing that there's some elements that are prescribed in statute. They want to ensure that they're working collaboratively with us as they recognize what we're faced with as we move forward. So I just wanted to ensure that you all knew that there was open communication as it relates to our partners at the state enterprise. And more to the point about the ballot measure to replenish the net position, as you heard Ms. Mackey say, we are going to explore other revenue options pursuant to the conversation that just ensued at the meeting that directly preceded this one. As we go to the next slide, it's important to note that we as an agency have been viewed to be very fiscally astute, and this is from the S&P Global Ratings report that we did disseminate to all board members on March 12th. And basically the quote, and I will read just for emphasis: management and governance in our view are very strong. This reflects our view of RTD's strategic positioning, risk management and financial management, and organizational effectiveness. And the reason why we call this out is if we don't continue with that mindset, we will be placing ourselves in a very precarious position as we move forward. So if we can go to the next slide relative to the decision and next steps needed, and the slide thereafter. More specifically, as it relates to immediate term decisions. We need to understand where the board is currently. I do recognize that we are talking in abstract, and the reason why we are doing such is we don't have an understanding in the direction, so staff has not looked at specific routes. We are talking from the vantage point of a reduction in service hours because there's a cost associated with that. So for instance, when we talk about a certain route that may not be picking up a lot of customers in the 4 a.m. window, that doesn't mean that we are advocating to eliminate said route. We may change the start time for said route to be at 6 a.m. hypothetically as we go forward. Going back to the comments I made at the beginning of this presentation, we're people moving people, and with our customers, there's no need for any of us. And so we are focused on utilizing that as our thought process relative to making decisions. But considering that where we are currently, we're going to ensure that we're leveraging our strategic plan, considering the priorities that we have of community value and customer excellence, employee ownership, and financial success. Those are extremely important. However, balancing that with a constrained operating environment as well. And so what I want to do now, considering if in fact you all do give direction relative to any type of service reduction, and what I mean by that is we're seeking guidance. We would flesh out some elements to give you a more informed picture to make a decision. But on the next slide, I wanted to share with you the risk delaying the service reduction. You saw from Ms. Mackey's previous slides that cash nears depletion, the credit rating, hence that's why I specifically called out what S&P had stated in their March 12th report relative to where we are. That could make it more difficult for us in the future as it relates to assets that we would need to procure. This is just an example relative to bus procurements. We traditionally like to use cash just by virtue of some of the strings that are tied with the discretionary grant programs. And further to the point, as I stated in the Finance and Planning Committee meeting, that there's a great likelihood that the 5337 program, being bus and bus facilities, may not have a notice of funding opportunity this summer, by all accounts that I have received from those within FTA. More so, it reduces our ability to prioritize long-term system needs and the other aspects we've talked about, but this just more or less puts forward what risks that we are contemplating if, in fact, a decision isn't made in the immediate near term. Going on to the next slide, this basically speaks to what we would do relative to engaging. This is not your traditional service change that we do on a tri-annual basis. We want to ensure that we were having a robust education and awareness campaign, and this timeline just lays that out, that we would commence that in June and then basically bring something forward to the board. Traditionally, when we have service changes, that goes through the committee, being Operations, Safety, and Security, but recognizing there is a clear-cut nexus to budgetary decisions relative to the Finance and Planning Committee. That's why we are here today saying that we're seeking some guidance so we can come back to you in May with some options so we can start that planning in a very judicious fashion. So more to the point with the next slide, leveraging a myriad of different tactics in order to garner feedback relative to various scenarios we would put forward should the board give us that direction to map those out. And with that, I'll yield the floor, and this concludes our presentation, and we look forward to engaging in dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO Mackey, GM CEO Johnson. We'll open it up to discussion. I'm going to go ahead and give Finance Chair Banker the floor first, if you have anything you want to discuss.
Yes. How'd you know?
I had an inkling.
Thank you. First of all, I do want to recognize that you have saved $56 million in base expenditures over the past year, because I know we've had a recent conversation, CFO Mackey, and you were telling me about a year ago when you first started, you started to look at the expenditures and start to scrub the base. So thank you for that. They're very good savings, and I see how we got started there. What I've looked at when I've gone through the presentation that we got last night, one of my first realizations is that a lot of the savings that we have so far are all on the RTD expenditure side of the budget. And the budget's got two pieces. There's the expenditures and then there's the revenues. And so I would hope that we would start to look at the revenue side more seriously now to see if we can come up with the $62 million that are needed to make sure that we do not have cuts. Because I can't support, and I suspect many of our board members, maybe all of our board members cannot support, a 20% reduction in service. So I just think we need to work together to try to find savings. And so I just had quickly put together a list. So here's a suggestion. Okay, what we had just talked about just a little while ago was the possibility of increasing fares, passes, and parking fees. That could bring in anywhere from $10, $12, $13 million. You had a measure in your in the presentation where you were talking about refinancing debt, and that could save $4 million a year. Okay, I like that. I prefer furloughs. Furloughing employees 1 day a week as opposed to layoffs, that could save $7 million. I know our union representative won't like this, but we've also briefly talked about reducing driver overtime from 20 million to 10 million. That could save 10 million. We also talked about putting on a transit fee on ticket sales. And Director Harlech just talked about that, and he was coming up with some numbers. I've got more conservative numbers. I was looking at some numbers also, and I'm thinking we can get anywhere from 10 to 14 million if we were to put a small fee on event ticket sales like sporting events. Hopefully it would bring in 40 million. That would be great. Increase grant applications, because I've also in the past have talked to CTE, and because of a variety of things, the tabor limitation will be lifted in the next state fiscal year, and in addition, the cost of oil and gas, as we all know, is going up. So I assume the CTE fund is going to be generating more revenues. So let's find out what those revenues are and see if we can ask for more money. Corporate sponsorships, we've sort of briefly talked about that. That might bring in a couple of $1 million. Just increasing, as I had mentioned in our last meeting, say, for example, the EcoPass sale. What I had mentioned at our committee is previously in 2019, we had $33 million worth of EcoPass sales. In 2024, we were down to 7. So it would be more of an effort of trying to get out there, selling EcoPass, Neighborhood Pass, taking a look at some of the other services that we sell, and of course that also ties into fare increases. Anti-fare evasion strategies, we've had a presentation not too long ago that if we could even reduce farther the anti-fare strategies that we've already been employing, we could save maybe about $1 million, $600,000, $700,000. And then, I believe I was talking to Mr. Presser not too long ago. I think this is where one of the suggestions came from. Maybe not, because I've been talking to a lot of folks lately. Approaching DIA and seeing if there's any interest in helping us help pay for either Skyride or helping us pay with the A-line or employees trying to reach the airport. I've just put together, excuse me, a couple of more on the revenue side than anything else. If we start talking about toll revenues, that's a much longer conversation. There's going to be more controversy involved. We have to work closely with CDOT, but it's a possibility. And so I think that bears discussion. So I haven't added up my list, but I think we're getting close to 60 million. Now, it would take a lot of work to get this done because this isn't internal work. Most of this would be external work, working with, whether it's CDOT or the City and County of Denver or DIA or maybe the state legislature. So it's a different level, but I think it can be done, and it would mean everybody pitching in, both staff and board, to see if we can come up with some of these revenue suggestions to help us get through the next couple of years. Then we can see where we are, and then we can analyze whether or not we have to go forward with the sales tax increase in '28. So there's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Treasurer Banker. Secretary Nicholson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. GMCO Johnson, I'm wondering, if we're talking about making a significant number of operational cuts in 2027, how does that work with, or impact the comprehensive operational analysis that we'll also be doing in 2027? Because if we make a ton of cuts, doesn't that kind of do, in a lot of ways, the work that we are planning to do with the COA in just choosing to make those cuts itself? So I guess I'm just wondering, how can those two processes happen at the same time, and what effects will that have on what we can do in the COA?
GMCO Johnson.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Director Nicholson, for the question. So there's a couple of things as I ground us in what a comprehensive operational analysis is, as we've been talking about it. Couple of things. When we look at our service network, it's done in a grid fashion. And for all intents and purposes, just to the point that Director Banker brought up, recognizing EcoPass sales went down in 2019. The transit service delivery model has changed due to the fact that people are no longer coming into the central business district as they did, say, in 2019. So with that as a backdrop, with the COA looking at a holistic fashion of population, land use, potential growth, where the activity centers are located, and there's other critical factors that will be taken into play. What are our service standards in a holistic fashion? Are we more or less focused on delivering services that have decreased headways on various aspects, which we would consider to be the spine of our network? That could still come into play, to the point that I raised earlier when I said that those scenarios, 20% or 36%, are for illustrative purposes, and we hadn't delved deep within. We're looking at where we currently go, and there could be savings rendered by virtue of the revenue hours that we're expending. If we're expending revenue hours whereby we're only getting 4 boardings per hour versus getting 30 boardings per hour, that doesn't necessarily upend the apple cart relative to the genesis, not the genesis, the purpose of a COA as we move forward. Keeping in mind that there was some element of an abridged COA that was done previously, and we took into account how we're running services, i.e. local routes versus community routes versus regional routes. So it does not negate the opportunity to leverage a COA to the best of our ability, because chances are we would not be making recommendations to reduce service where there was a propensity of greater transit utilization.
Secretary Nicholson.
Okay. I guess, it strikes me at, considering the significant impact that these cuts are going to have on community across the metro area, however we end up doing them, pretty much. I guess what I'm wondering is, wouldn't it be better to make these decisions as part of a comprehensive operational analysis rather than us just sort of doing them and not doing any of the public outreach that goes along with, I mean, the COA has a huge go out and talk to people, engage with people, get community buy-in, all of that kind of stuff. The process we're talking about here is basically, we're going to make a decision internally, and we're not going to do town halls. We're not going to engage in a big way with stakeholders before we make huge cuts, at least not that I've heard of us talking about having any kind of major public outreach. So I guess my question is, wouldn't it be better if we could do this as part of the COA as opposed to just doing it on our own?
GMCO Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Director Nicholson, as I indicated, the reason why we said we needed a near-term decision because we want to take 6 months. Hence, we would like to have direction in May because any type of service that would be modified optimally from staff perspective would happen in January. And so we're here in April. So this would not be done in absentia. This would be done through the efforts of engaging to discern what might be optimal relative to the frequencies on a route, for instance, whereby there wasn't, as I indicated before, there weren't boardings, or maybe there's not late night boardings. What we're trying to do is have an understanding of where that may be. I would not come before you and say that we do any type of service reduction without engaging with the public, because that's not an open and transparent process. When we talk about we're providing a subsidized service of which individuals are paying into, and we're people moving people, that negates the entire intent, at least from my perspective, of what I do here leading the agency, because that's been in the forefront of my mind, because these are difficult decisions in which to make, and we can't do them solely in a vacuum. Further to the point, as it relates to the COA, that is totally up to you all, recognizing that a COA basically will inform decisions relative to what our service standards are going forward. We could basically pivot from that as we see that there's an opportunity, but absence of having any clear-cut direction with a comprehensive operational analysis, because we will deem what is most feasible by virtue of having that engagement, and with the board weighing in from those that are most equipped, being subject matter experts in a system design vantage point, I think will play favorable to this organization as we ensure that we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
No, go ahead. Director Larson.
So, Director Banker, I did add up all of the ideas that you had, or that you listed, for what that could be in terms of making up the gap, at least the ones where you had specific numbers that you identified. And if we could possibly do all of them, that would be $48 million by my count. However, most of those, I think, are pretty speculative. I mean, I guess, we could certainly raise fares on our own, and we could refinance debt on our own. At least those are things we have control over. That would get us about $16 million. I mean, furloughs and overtime, I don't know how we could do those things without hurting our service hours or our reliability. And then the other things are kind of just dependent on things we don't really know if they'll happen or not. I mean, the reality is, I think if we want to have a surefire solution to this problem without cutting service, we need to refer a ballot measure, and I think we should. I mean, I think we owe it to our riders and our the taxpayers and our population to have the opportunity to say, no, we don't want to cut this service. No, we will raise our property taxes or maybe our sales taxes so that we don't have to have these cuts in service, so that the Denver metro area's economy can stay strong, and people can have the option to ride transit, at least as much as they do now. And that to me is I just think we should just do it, and knowing that it might not pass, but at least then we can say, look, we gave y'all the option to not have this happen, and you didn't want to fund it, so these are the service cuts we're going to do. I mean, I certainly think even if we do that, we should plan on the $62 million plan to make those cuts, because we have to start planning, and we wouldn't know it was going to pass till November. So we'd have to go forward with those plans. But also, I mean, in a way, the public sort of stakeholder or what have you, where we talk about all the cuts would, in a sense, be a marketing tool for the option not to have those cuts, and maybe it would pass. So I just think that that's what we should do, although I think we should, in any case, plan for the $62 million of cuts.
Thank you, Director Larson. I've got, just to review the bidding, Director Chandler, Director Geisinger, and Director Rusha, and Director Nicholson in the queue. So Director Chandler, you are up.
I have a question in general. I don't know the answer to it. What did the detabering measure in 2024 accomplish? I mean, what happened with that? Because I think going back to the voter at this time, after we just detabered, might be very difficult. And so I'd like to know what that accomplished. And then the other, I would like to just say, the overarching direction, I think, is what we are trying to accomplish today. Not the granular decisions of this COA. So I think we need to put that in perspective. We need to give direction in whatever direction that is determined. And then from there, that will give us an opportunity to use the COA to get the granular achievements that we're trying to get to. So I don't want to conflate the two. I want us to look at the bigger picture today, to what percentages are we talking about reducing either service or what additional savings we could come up with. And with that, it will give us direction then on that comprehensive operating agreement, or what does A stand for again? Analysis, thank you. I'm a little tired. So anyway, I just want to give everybody that perspective, but I really do want to know, what did the detabering accomplish?
GMCO Johnson.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. It enabled the agency to basically retain the tax revenue and not be capped, returning those proceeds that were over the cap going back to the taxpayers.
So can I ask a follow-up question? So what additional revenues did we receive based on, or just the cap that was not returned to the taxpayer? How
Yeah.
did that work?
Kelly's shaking her head. No, can you address that from that financial vantage point? Thank you.
I've been talking too much, the microphone is no longer working. So we have not received any incremental tax revenue from that yet.
Are we going to at some point? I mean, I heard 2027 maybe. I mean, what does that additionally mean?
You know, there are projections that we could in the near future. I don't have definitive numbers I could share with you, and I would be speculating.
Okay. Is clarification? Okay. Yeah.
So,
Dr. Guzman.
Director Chandler, it may be helpful to understand it this way as well. One of the considerations we had to figure out with the budget prior to being debruced or detabered is that we would have had to set up a fund that would have locked money up in the circumstance that we would exceed the tabor limitations and have to return it to taxpayers. So we don't have to set that money to the side and protect it. We can actually use that within the budget. So there's not an incremental piece to it. It's what would have been removed from our funds, from our liquidity, to be able to protect it to return to taxpayers should the need arise. And instead, what we asked was to be able to retain those funds and use them for the operation of the system. So it doesn't look like it's not getting additional tax in terms of the tabor law. It's not having to reserve an amount of money to return if we go over the tabor ceiling in any given year. And we knew that that was immediately on the horizon at the time that we were asking for it.
Dr. Chandler.
So in effect, we were hedging our bets that we would get to the tabor cap at some point, and now we can keep that. We did not at the time. And I'm speaking as a person who's rather knowledgeable about this, that was not the way it was sold to the voter. And I don't think that if you go to the ballot right away, people are going to say, well, you just detabered. And they're expecting you to have received additional funds at that time, even though it wasn't, we aren't going to receive those funds today or haven't in the past. So I'm just saying that I find that kind of disingenuous, maybe. I don't know. But I'm just saying is that I think that the taxpayer is going to go, no.
Go to online Director Geisinger.
Thank you. Just a couple quick comments. I think I appreciate the recommendation from staff and Director Larson was also mentioning it. I do think we're going to have to go to the ballot in 2028. And I think that all of these decisions in the short run need to be looking at the longer run and at the strategic situation that we're in. We have a lot of requests, Sundance and the Broncos with Burnham Yard and joint service and a lot of things that we would love to be doing and hope to be doing. And we've got a lot of demands on our processes, but I think it's time that the board and staff look at these issues in a longer range sort of way and how we would present it to taxpayers that might be something they would want to support. Thanks.
Director Risha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like my colleague, Treasurer Banker, I also have lots of notes. So would it be okay if I got through half of it and then just came back so other people could?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. All right. So first, thank you, staff, for this. And Ms. Johnson, I would not want to be sitting in your seat. I think this is a difficult position to sit in my seat. I can't imagine sitting in yours. So I appreciate your patience with us as we get through this. I concur with Director Larson. I also think we need to go to the ballot now. So if we look at the packet, staff's presentation and recommendation is to go to the ballot in 2028, but we would still be looking at 20 to 36% service cuts, asset, maintenance deferrals, and mass layoffs. So 2028 best case scenario is still a pretty bad case scenario. So I actually think that we need to have a serious conversation about going to the ballot this year. BART did it, and it worked for them. But I do think there is value in going to the taxpayer and saying, hey, do you want to invest in RTD or not? Because I am very much afraid that, with all due respect to staff, that the options we have before us are not options. We might, in 2028, be able to recoup some revenue with voter approval and, right-size the budget. But then we might also be running empty buses because slashing services is going to not just, slashing services is going to make the system more unusable. And we are going to lose riders, not just because there are some, there's a ticket they can't buy because there's a bus that's not running, but because it's so unusable, right? So if we look back to what happened when we had like slowdowns in the, Southeast Corridor or the coping panels project, like our ridership on those lines like tanked. We couldn't even give it away for free during free fares, right? So I just want to caution us, that we really need to think about that demand elasticity. And while we might be able to fix our budget in a couple years, it doesn't mean we will be able to address the ridership issue. We are not even operating at pre-COVID levels. So for us to sit here and say, well, 20%, 36% service cut is a viable option, I think it's wishful thinking. And I understand why we're having the conversation, but I'd like to shift the paradigm and ask us to be a little bit more brave and have a serious conversation about going to voters. If we do that, we have a short window to refer something to the ballot, but it's been done before. It can be done. And I think we owe it to our customers and our staff to at least try. So those are my comments. I have a couple questions, Mr. Chair, if I can just ask one and then I'll yield the floor. Is that
You
okay?
can, CFO Mackey was trying to
Oh, I'm
interject here for
sorry.
a second. Yeah.
If I may add one point of clarification, as you know, fair revenue is about 5% of our total revenue. So if we do have significant declines in ridership, it doesn't substantially impact revenue. But of note, the same size revenue is investment income, which is derived from our cash and investment balance. So that's projected to decline significantly. It would actually probably be more exposed in investment income.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mackey. And I completely understand. And I don't want to, there are two goals here, right? Ridership is a goal and financial security is a goal. And I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, I guess. Because, like I said, we don't want to be running empty buses. We might be financially sound, but if our service isn't usable, we're not a good product. But I understand what you're saying financially, and I respect that. So I do have a question about the packet. What is in this proposal, what's the breakdown of layoffs between represented and non-represented employees in terms of just like a percentage? And from where we are now, what's the estimated total raw number of layoffs that we have done, planned, or are planning in this proposal? Thank you.
QMCO Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I'll take the last question. We have not had any reductions in force at this juncture. I want to be clear about that. I know that there has been statements in various media outlets. There have been no reductions in force. Just to ground everybody, once again, there's the organizational design and workplace assessment. There are realignments in certain departments, operations, the former capital planning department, recognizing that we are streamlining positions to better allocate how we're delivering service. There's a process that we're going through currently as it relates to different positions. There's some positions that have been eliminated. There are individuals that may be applying for said positions. So as it relates to where we currently sit, and before I answer that, let me just put in something else, that there also has been attrition that's been factored in. There's retirements and things of the like. Won't be able to give you a number relative to how many positions or people that are directly impacted until we get through this process. So I want to be clear about that as we move forward. As it relates to the breakdown between non-represented and represented employees, once again, we have put forward for illustrative purposes scenarios, either 20% or 36%. We have not run any type of modeling relative to how many positions that would take. We can say roughly as we go forward that if we have a reduction in service just by virtue of the way our organization is structured relative to represented employees being 2/3 of the organization versus where we are with non-represented. But let's be clear, we have every position that we do in this organization. If somebody is not directly delivering the service, it's in support of service. So this is a broad brush example. And I want to be careful as I preface this because next thing it'll say that Deborah said that this is happening here. But when we think about where we sit with the call center, for instance, if we decrease our service hours, does it make sense to have the call center open for 8 hours on a Sunday? So there could be direct impacts as it relates to the call center. And for some of you that were on the board back in 2021, you may recall that the call center hours had been decreased and later we opened that back up as we brought additional service back. So it's tangential as we move forward. And so with direction from the board, I can then provide that specificity relative to what we're projecting regarding what service may appear to be, and then the ancillary divisions and other work units that support that going forward.
I'm going to go to Secretary Nicholson and then come back to you for a second round, or do you have a follow-up to that point? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I don't want to get into a back and forth or argue, but I'm looking at the packet, and the packet has hard numbers relative to reductions in force, and that's why I was asking, right? Like, because we had to plug in numbers to get the output, and so it can be an estimate.
Okay,
That's okay,
got
but
it.
I
So
just
Ms.
wanna
Mackey can address that. I thought you wanted more, so
Yeah.
thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
Mackie?
In our last session, which was the closed session, we actually did get that question. I believe it was Director Nicholson who asked it, and I think I remember the number, but at risk of giving you a wrong number, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Can I email you the figures? Okay.
We will share that with the entire board, let me be clear, because I'm certain all of you want that as well relative to where we're sitting. Thank you.
So before I go to Secretary Nicholson, I just wanted to put in a couple thoughts from me. You should not only consider easy options when you're evaluating all your alternatives. You need to see the really tough decisions in front of you, because if we choose not to close the deficit, we are speeding towards a financial outcome that is equally as bad. And so I think it is very important for us as a board to have the full and broadest range of options so we can decide what is a good idea and what is not a good idea. If we take things off the board, we will not get a good ranking going forward. So I've gone through this with companies, and when you start narrowly, you end up making really, really stupid decisions. If you start broadly, you can start to rank your decisions with a little bit more accuracy. And I think that's what we're kind of asking for going forward. Secretary Nicholson, and then Director Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Director Chandler asked, let's focus on the big picture. And I guess I'll just lay out what I think the big picture looks like here. I am uncomfortable moving forward with large cuts that prejudge the COA, which is supposed to be the process by which we make large cuts with much more public input. I also recognize, however, that there are some things that we probably can cut this year without having nearly the same impact on our overall transit network that the level of cuts presupposed in the packet here would get us to. And so I think that there is a path forward where we do some amount of cuts, we use some amount of the unrestricted reserve, and get to a place where the network is largely still not exactly where it is today, but where we've cut the easy stuff, basically. Go through that process of the COA in 2026 and 2027. Start polling on a ballot measure for 2028, which we're now procuring that contract so that we can do that. And that polling will tell us whether or not moving forward with a ballot measure makes any sense at all, whether voters are willing or interested or considering to pay the kind of money it would take to not have those cuts go into effect in 2028. And that will inform us in 2027 about what we should do and how dramatically we should move forward. So that's where my head is at currently. It's not to put this off. It's not to say we're not going to make these cuts. It is to say we have a process for making these cuts, and we should make full use of that process to get the public bought in on the reality that we're dealing with. And in the process of doing so, hopefully get them to say, hey, we don't really want you to make these cuts, so let's give you a bunch of money. But I think if we just go whole hog into it, or if we put our head in the sand, both of those would be terrible outcomes. The last thing I'll say, as much as I would love to go to the ballot this year, Front Range Passenger Rail is going to the ballot this year. They are the sales tax measure that is going to the ballot this year, and putting two transit sales tax ballot measures at the same time will cause both of them to fail. So I have no interest in trying to undermine the one chance we'll get in 20 years to pass Front Range Passenger Rail, but I do think we need a cohesive, step-by-step plan that either gets us to a ballot measure in 28, or we find out the voters aren't willing to give us money, and then we make long-term significant cuts that recognize that reality. That's where I'm at.
GMCO Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify the intent of a comprehensive operational analysis is not to reduce service. The whole aspect of it is to ensure that you are delivering efficient services to where people want to go, and that traditionally they're done in a 3 to 5 year horizon because the landscape or the operating environment may change due to the fact that there's development and things alike. So I just had to correct that for the record. That is not the intent of the COA, is to, as you said, Director Nicholson, service cuts. I have been involved with comprehensive operations analysis at other major transit properties, and that was not the intent. So I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
Secretary Nicholson.
Yes, obviously, if we didn't have a $200 million structural deficit, we wouldn't have to be considering service cuts as part of a COA. But unfortunately, that's where we are. So that means that whatever changes to the service pattern, yeah, obviously, I would have loved to have done a COA, and when I ran for the board, thought that the COA was going to be a conversation about how do we expand service, how do we re-network the service. Realistically, the conversation over the next 18 months is how do we cut service so that it is not detrimental, and the COA is an outreach process that allows us to have that conversation in a better way than us just getting in a room and maybe having 2 town halls and saying, hey, we're going to cut 20% of your service, hope you are happy with what we did. So that's where I come at from this one. It's a much better public engagement process to get people behind the difficult decisions that we have to make.
Director Guzman, I'll come to you in a second. CFO Mackey.
May I add one point of clarification? So on April 9th, I met with the COA planning group at a meeting called Financial Situation Implications for COA Planning. So in that discussion, they were asking me, based on the public meetings we had, about how much we would recommend reducing service. And I obviously could not give them percentages because we not released our recommendations, but we did obviously release them yesterday. And when I saw some of the team members who will be working on the COA, they had already seen what we put up publicly, and so they've seen those percentages. And so they are aware of those, and so their idea is they would support basically the service plans that we would have approved by the board.
Director Guzman, thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I want to take a big step back. In 2023, we overestimated sales and use tax by $40 million. In 2024, it was $69 million, and in 2025, it was $34 million. So every one of those years, as much as I appreciate our friends from CU Leads coming to us and giving us a very moderate opinion, we should have had the foresight, and I stated it on the record every year, that we should look at the more pessimistic view, because I saw this coming. And we just had a meeting about the very same thing, taking a more pessimistic view, right? There's optimistic, moderate, pessimistic in our world. That has not helped because we have budgeted higher than what we've received. And hope is not a strategy to get out of this. We have to have actual numbers. So to that end, I would like to make a recommendation as well with these, that as we go through the budget process, we look very, very seriously at what we anticipate to receive for sales and use tax in 2027 as you begin this process. And based on what we heard earlier today, I still disagree, and I think that the number that we were presented for 2027 is likely too high, which is unfortunate. But at least if we start with a reality that we're not likely to see the number that we're given, in the best outcome, we have more money to do something with. In the worst outcome, we have budgeted appropriately and we don't have to make cuts to plans in the third or fourth quarter. That's a budgeting matter that goes in tandem with this, right? So I want to make sure we deal with that piece as well as a recommendation going forward. That may require a fiscal policy change on our end, because we are supposed to take a conservative look on some things and then accept other things as what they are. I don't like having to have this conversation, but I'm going to tell you thank you for filling in the gaps in the information and coloring in the entire picture that was painted for us previously with the additional information. I am comfortable moving forward with the recommendation for the 62 million in cuts, and I hate having to say that, but at least I'm there. Thank you for helping me get there. I do not want to put at risk anything that we don't have to by delaying decision making. And for once, take it with a grain of salt, everybody. We're finally in good company with all of the other transit agencies in the entire country. SEPTA, TriMet, Chicago's Area Rapid Transit, MTA, BART, Rhode Island's, DARTS, even Minot, North Dakota, and AC Transit are facing the same thing we're facing right now. That's just to name a few. Coast to coast, this is happening everywhere. So we're finally equal in that with everybody. We just have to make a decision about how we're going to deal with things here. So one thing, budget, how we deal with sales and use tax preparations and anticipations of funding. Two, let's follow our fiscal policies, but maybe a little bit more conservatively this year, please. Three, I would give the recommendation that we should go for the $62 million in cuts, much as I hate to do that. But I also understand that that doesn't mean that we're just going to stop running services somewhere. That means we're going to adjust to where it makes sense and make it more efficient for where we need to. I will be the third director to bring it up. I do think we need to try and go for a ballot referendum this year. It takes 2 or 3 tries. If we fail one, we have more years to come, and the board can carry on that work to try and get it done. But short of doing that, I do agree with Director Larson and Director Rusha. We need to give our constituents the opportunity to decide to defend their transportation system. And not doing so seems like a big disservice. Last thing I will say, this is a definition, and this is what was in our board packet when we passed it. And I'm not trying to pick a fight, but I do think we need to decouple some things. This is a decision we need to make now. We cannot wait. I have worked on a comprehensive operational analysis since I got on this board. It's one of the first things I learned about as a new director, and I have stayed on top of it the entire time. It is a systematic study conducted by public transit agencies to evaluate and improve their transit system. Evaluate and improve their transit system. It assesses performance, efficiency, effectiveness of the transit network, including all modes, identifies gaps and opportunities for improvement, and ensures that the transit system meets the evolving needs of the community and the region. It's forward-looking, a planning document, and it also takes into consideration the fiscal reality of the agency and what it can afford to do. And right now, we don't have that done. That is for the future. We are living in the now. We have to make a decision now. So I think we really, thank you, Director Chandler. Separate things, let's not conflate. Deal with this issue, and then we will move on to that. Thanks.
As a native of North Dakota, visit northdakota.com. Thanks you for the plug. Director Larson.
Yeah, I just want to sort of say that if we do refer a ballot measure, and I know we need some clarification on this, but there's clearly a whole section of the RTD Act that allows us to, with the voters' approval, levy property taxes for funding. And while we'd want to make sure we fully understand the sort of specifics around that, I think if we went for a property tax, even as Front Range Rail's going for a sales tax, that would give us enough distance from what they're doing so that we couldn't just assume that we're going to be undermining what they're doing. And in any case, and you know, I'm not doing this because I think it would pass for sure, or I don't know, we won't have done any polls most likely. There's no way to tell. I'm just doing it because I think it's the right thing to do, because it is the only possibility that I see that can definitely, if it passes, prevent these cuts. All of these other things, you know, seem to me to be risk putting our bond rating in question. There, you know, there's a lot of hopes. There's a lot of you know, maybe ifs, but if we raise taxes, we will have the money to avoid these cuts for sure. And you know, look, we should be planning on doing these cuts at this point for sure, because we have to balance the budget. But the only way I can think of that we can be pretty certain to be able to get out of that is to do property taxes, or you know, obviously sales taxes too, but I appreciate some of the difficulties there. But the other thing is, we can set this up so that it could expire in 2 years. We could say this is a temporary property tax increase so that we can retain current levels of service. And it'll expire in 2 years, and in 2028, there will be another ballot measure for, you know, something hopefully more grand than just keeping things the way they are. You know, we can tailor it to be as sort of minimal as possible. By my calculations, to get the money we need, it would basically be 1 mil. Most properties are somewhere between 80 and 120 mils in this area. So it would be, as a percentage of property tax, could be pretty small for a very, you know, to prevent 20% cut of service. You know, I can't say it would pass. I have no idea. And there's a lot of reasons why you can say it wouldn't, but to say that it definitely wouldn't pass, to me, seems crazy. And people should have the opportunity to decide.
Secretary Nicholson, is this on the ballot?
Yeah, it's just direct
Then
response
I'll go back to
too.
Director Russo.
Actually, it's really a question for GC Snyder. Do we have the legal authority to go to the ballot for a property tax?
GMC, or General Counsel Snyder.
So I think as I said earlier, that it's much clearer, obviously, with sales tax, that we have that authority. It's a little less clear with respect to property tax. There is some provisions in the current RTD statute that preceded Tabor that did authorize the RTD board to assess and collect a property tax, but we'd have to work through those details, as I said earlier.
Thank you. Director Russo.
Thank you, sir. A question and a few comments, and then I'm done for the night. Don't hold me to that, though. Right. So back to the packet. For cuts to the civil rights department, I just have a couple clarifying questions. The first is, does that include like hiring freezes? Do we have any open positions in that department right now? That's my first question. And the second question is, it looks like staff is suggesting we do our own modeling and reduce our reliance on contractors. I'm fine with that because I think our team, I trust them to do statistics. But I'm a bit concerned if that includes like potential fares changes or the COA. That's like a lot of work, and I don't want to cut corners when it comes to planning. So I was just wondering if staff could kind of address that, where those gaps are going to be filled. And again, I'm not saying staff can't handle it. I just worry about putting some additional pressure or maybe changing our plan, like relative to a fare study or COA. Thank you.
GMCO Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Before I answer it, I'll share this. We have a critical hiring process. When it comes to safety and regulatory affairs, it goes through this rubric, and quite naturally, as it relates to us adhering to statute, various regulations and things of the like, we are going to adhere to that. There is an opening in civil rights. Case in point, let me use this. We now have Civil Rights Director Kelly Irving. We had Carl Green that left the organization that went to the Pacific Northwest region. We hired for that position. There is a vacancy as it relates to an EEO specialist. We are going to fill that position. Relative to what was stated there, I know specifically there was a software program that we were utilizing. It basically had to do with disadvantaged business enterprise due to the interim final rule that the Trump administration put forward. It wasn't prudent, hence, since I don't want to get into partisan politics, but you can follow that thread. There was no need for that program. Software program. So those are the type of savings. We are not trying to decimate the critical work that we do by virtue of trying to render cost savings. It's been done with intentionality and purpose. And further to the point, as it relates to equity analyses and things of the like as well, we are not basically sunsetting those contracts. There's some elements that are more loose, i.e. training that we had. We have a very well adept learning and development leader in Dr. Melissa McDowell, and recognizing we're leveraging modules that we can do internally as opposed to having a third party come in and do that. So I hope that answers your question there. Thank you.
Treasurer Banker and then Director, yeah, oh, yeah, sorry, I thought you were done.
So, thank you. That concludes my questions that I have. I appreciate the information. Just a few more comments, and I'll pass the baton to my colleagues. So I just wanted to add that I do agree with Director Guzman about our fiscal outlook. I don't think it's as rosy as it looks. And if you were at the meeting earlier, it doesn't even look that rosy. I do think we need to get more conservative, especially as we look at what's happening just in the geopolitical space and the job market. As it relates to our COA, like if our COA said we were going to reduce service by 20 to 36%, I think we should all just pack up and go home because the COA is like a long-term plan. And we did do our SOP and budget-related service cuts before at a similar time frame, and it was unfortunate timing, but like the show does have to go on. So with that, I would say we do have existing service standards, and we do have a current SOP. Like we have guidelines. We're not flying blind or driving blind. So I just feel like if we are going to do these cuts, then we should stick to those existing guidelines as best as we can. And staff, please raise your hand, flag, interrupt me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that that is what we are going to do, right? We're going to look at, okay, I got a nod, yes. So we're going to look at our current plans, our current board-approved policy as we move forward with recommendations for what we hope to be temporary service cuts. As it relates to like the tough decisions and what's before us, I could be simplifying things too much or reading it wrong. Please be gracious with me because like everyone else, I only had like 12 hours to look at this information before our meeting today. We got this last night. But it looks to me that we are looking for like $210 million. And we have like $180 million in the bank that could be liquidated. Like it's cash. And if you look at packet pages 38 to 43, thank you staff for that information, those graphs and that chart. It clearly shows like how much pressure joint service puts on our cash reserves, which is like I think it was like additional 184 million, right? But if you look at the staff recommendations and what we've discussed tonight, so that's packet page 62, I think, like staff didn't present a solution and the board's not asking for one, an option that involves delaying joint service to avoid like significant cuts, slashing potentially a third of our existing service and jobs. Like instead we're looking, so I get it's not politically expedient, okay? And I'm gonna hear about this after our meeting. Thank you for not kicking me, Treasurer Banker. But it feels like we're talking about like gutting service and ruining people's financial lives and their situation instead of at least broaching a tough conversation. I'm not saying we don't do joint service, but if a ballot initiative isn't on the table, like I feel like that's the message we're sending. We're saying like we would rather risk destroying our bus network and we'd rather defer maintenance again and like risk trains coming off the tracks. Maybe that's a little excessive, but like you get the idea, right? So we can build something new that potentially we could just put off for like a year and a half or two or whatever. And I don't know if that's even possible. Maybe there's something in this joint service, agreement that says we have to like pay now, we have to start now, we have to build now, and we can't do that after we're on a more stable footing with the ballot measure. But anyway, I don't know if that's a question or a comment. I'm just a little bit concerned that the message we're sending to our customers and to our staff is that potentially ruining their lives and cutting their job. I'm gonna cry. I'm done. That's just more politically expedient for us, or it's more comfortable. I'd rather us just talk about the sacred cow. Sorry. Thanks.
Treasurer, CFO Mackey.
Forgive me if I may make a point of clarification, and I should have put this on the slide. Your comments just made me realize that. So packet page 62, staff's recommendation, that was before considering joint service. So if you layer on joint service, that would actually be a worse financial situation.
Okay, thank you. I've got Treasurer Banker, Director Whitmore, then we'll go back to you, and then Director Curie.
Okay, well, since you brought up joint service, something that was pulled off our agenda, and please, Denver folks, do not get me the wrong way. But one of the things that was pulled off our agenda was spending $60 million on brand-new 47 articulated buses for the Colfax project. Okay, 60 million is what we need. Okay, now, I'm not suggesting at all that we don't go forward with that purchase, which you'll see next month. And so I would ask that folks think about the entire region. So the Northwest region has been working on the Northwest rail line for decades, okay? So I would just ask for your patience on that. So if you're looking for money, you can offer the Denver buses and we'll have the whole thing fixed. But that's not the reason I wanted to say a few things. Let's put this in perspective. We're talking $62 million. Quite frankly, that's less than 5% of our budget. We can figure this out. And for those folks that are talking about going to the voters, my first question would be, have you ever worked on a campaign raising millions of dollars to do an education campaign and to go out and start educating voters and doing what you need to do to win an election? You know, I was there when we did Guide the Ride in 1997, and I'll tell you, we got creamed. It takes a lot of work. If we were going to do it this year, we should have started 6 months ago. It's way too late to start talking about a tax increase this year. And in addition, Front Range Passenger Rail is out there working it. And for us to chime in at the 11th hour to say, oh, we want one too, you know, I think it's not fair. What I'm also trying to say, and probably not in the best way here, I think we're all struggling. I know we're all struggling with this. I get it. If we were to go forward with a 20% service reduction, I feel that would be like just another nail in the RTD coffin. We've already reduced service by about 40% because of COVID. We reduce it another 20%. You do have to ask yourself the question of what is our mission? What are we doing? And again, I think we can fix this without going forward and basically decimating our ridership numbers. We can work together. We can figure this out. We do have options. Let's put everything on the table. We'll have one of our long nights where we'll debate the issues, but hopefully we'll come down and we'll find the 62 million. So, and with that, I'm sure we're going to be having quite a few more budget discussions, which I enjoy, by the way, because if you don't have a budget, nothing happens, whether it's RTD or any other government unit. I'm so pleased that everybody is now interested in budget issues, so thank you.
So I'm going to go, we've got Director Whitmore and then Arcuri, and then I'm going to go to Harwick, so neither one of those, or none of those three have spoken yet. Then we'll come back around for another try. Director Whitmore?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to our welcoming transit environment, I see the security and public safety reduction, and I'm just curious how we go about estimating that savings. Is it, excuse me, running parallel with service that's not being offered? So we don't need, is that all it is? Or are we going deeper perhaps into Union Station issues or other safety issues that we've worked so hard to improve? So just a question for clarification for either one of you.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah, please.
So yes, so recognizing that if in fact we were having a reduction in service hours, would it make sense to have foot patrols at Denver Union Station when the bus box is closed? So those are the type of elements as we look at the security contract in reference to second crew members, for instance. that's all tied to what the service reduction would be just from a holistic vantage point.
Director Arcuri.
Thank you. I echo what Director Benker said, that there are other things we can do rather than go to a vote of the people right now or slash service 20%. We did the budget survey. There are a whole lot of ideas we can explore, and I think we can find something that adds up to something that's doable and that is sustainable. It might not all begin rolling in, like in February or March of 2027, but it could set us on a good path. I agree that we're digging our own grave if we cut service by a substantial amount, of which I would say 20%, even 10% is substantial when you look at what we still haven't recovered from after the pandemic. I also just want to, not that I'm opposed to going to the ballot for like a property tax or sales tax, but I think we really need to have our act together. We've got to know our numbers. We've got to be able to sell this. And keep in mind, especially with a property tax, which that idea does resonate with me. Thank you, not Dr. Larson. Director Larson.
Doctor.
Maybe I just promoted you, huh?
That's Guzman. Dr. Guzman is next to you.
That's true. Yeah, he does have a PhD. Now I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
So, like, let's say we did go to the ballot in 2026 with property tax. It would become effective in 2027, but you wouldn't actually receive any of that 2027 property collections until 2028. And so we have to be cognizant of timing on all of these things, because we really do want to get things moving in 2027. But again, it will be trickling in. And so I think that's something that I would like staff to consider just going forward whenever we do anything. Let's don't assume that we have a full year's projections worth of money. But again, I would really hate to cut service even more. And even Director Nicholson, if we were to wait for the results of the COA to guide us, isn't that about a year-long study?
For all intents and purposes, recognizing where we would sit, it could be about 18 months.
Yeah, so that would be the same thing. We wouldn't be able to make any implementation in 2027. So I'm really concerned, CFO Mackey. I see from your analysis and your team's analysis that 2027 is really crucial to get the ball rolling. That's going to be really, really difficult for us. And like Director Benker also, she threw out something which was not a suggestion, but let's also look for other one-time expenditure cuts we can do. Because when we go to the ballot, right, someday for sales tax or property tax, for joint service or whatever, I would prefer that we go for a sales tax, property tax increase for dessert, rather than just maintaining the meat and potatoes of our day-to-day business. Because if we use all of these high-powered options up now, what are we going to do when we want to launch us into the future? Then I think our hands are really, really tied. Thank you.
Thank you for comments. So I'm going to go to Director Harwick, then I'm going to go for final comments. We have a hard stop coming up, and I am reluctant to even point out that we have an other matters item. Okay, so I'll go Director Harwick, and then we'll see if anyone has any quick final comments.
This question, I'm guessing there's not an answer tonight, but I'm just curious if we were to, I'm just thinking back to the presentation in March, and if we were to do this 20% cut, and we were looking at the sort of the changing, the timing of like shortening routes and running at different, like, do we have an idea, and maybe we do or don't, like how many, not necessarily our like how many of our customers do we know how many people would be impacted by these cuts as well? Like, do we know how many people are like riding, like if we're riding go ahead.
GMCO Johnson.
Yes, as we go forward, we have boarding data, hence that's why we provide that to the board, each month in reference to ridership. So we look at that by virtue of each rail line, commuter rail line, and bus route. So we would have an understanding, hence that's why I made the reference to like early morning service reductions and things of the like, because that's predicated upon what those boardings are, because of course we track that.
Director Harwood.
So in theory, we also, not that I'm trying to make this argument for us, but like this could be the proper size of the fleet if our numbers really don't support that. If we're only having like one boarding an hour, going through this process of this potential 20% cut is actually making the fleet what it should be.
That's potentially, because when you say what size the fleet should be, because we already are above our spare ratio as we go forward, and we already have that outline relative to where we sit. So it's hard for me to answer that question in a definitive manner because I'm not, yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
And then further to the point, I just wanted to say, as we talk about boardings, let's be clear that we still would be doing an equity analysis and everything else that we have as we make informed decisions going forward, because we're not trying to disenfranchise some vulnerable populations from a customer segment vantage point. So that's incredibly important to note as well.
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay, so then I have a part two, and it's kind of to go with Director Rusha and Director Guzman and Director Larson. But also Dr. Arcuri, since everybody's getting a promotion tonight. I hear you about dessert and meat and potatoes, so I really do. I'm with you on that. But I do think about like if we were going to go to the voters this year, which I get is an insane sprint. But what I wonder about is going with the property tax and actually going alongside Front Range Passenger Rail as a dual campaign and saying we're fundamentally changing transit in the metro area. Vote 1A and vote 1B or whatever that ends up being. But it would just be a way to like share costs and really just try to like go full throttle for transit in the metro area. So just a way to, instead of cannibalizing each other, it would be going together.
Okay, Director Nicholson and Director Larson, then we'll call it there.
So a couple of things. First off, I believe, and I'm just doing this from memory, that we are only legally allowed to go for $500,000 if that law is still even valid law, which I don't think it is. And I think given that enough people have been interested in this, it might make sense to have our legal department come back to the board with a definitive legal opinion. Can we do this? So that we can, decide whether, anyway. This is probably the most important decision that I will have made over the course of 2 years on the board when it comes to our operations and finance. And as much as I trust staff, I also believe that we have $300 million in our operating reserve and about the same in our capital reserve and about $20 million budgeted in our unrestricted reserve. And so if we want to decide that we're going to make $30 million worth of cuts and spend $30 million of our reserves to not have to do that this year, as far as I know legally, we can do that. It might not be advisable. It might piss off the financial markets in certain ways, but I don't think we should just accept as is that we have to do this by making a ton of cuts right now, exactly like this, and then say to the public, well, we didn't really have any meaningful consultations with you. We didn't go around and sit down with all the city council members, county commissioners. We didn't engage them. We just did what we had to do right now, and you're going to have to live with it. I don't think that's politically smart. And I think if we want to go to the voters in 2028, which is I didn't even think we could do that. I think we need to do it in 2030, but I'm recognizing that financially we may need to do it in 28, that we are going to have to do a ton of work in advance of that to get taxpayers to trust us. And The process as we are outlining it here is we are going to make a decision about your transit service and you are going to live with it. And I don't think that's a good way to get taxpayers to like us. So I have serious problems with just moving ahead with the staff report. I think we should dig in more to other opportunities, which is not to say that we shouldn't make those cuts in 2028, but I think there's a timing here that if we really are serious about winning a ballot measure campaign, we have to ask additional questions.
Thank you. CFO Mackey, I am sensing a cash versus reserves discussion coming out.
You have good prediction abilities. So the reserves, like the operating reserve and the capital reserve, are made up numbers by this board. They're not a reflection of cash or liquidity or financial sustainability. It's literally what you choose to put into the fiscal policy determines what those numbers are, and we follow what the board says they should be. So it's not a reflection of cash and fiscal sustainability. I would just add, I joined a meeting with the dean of Harvard Business School a few weeks ago, and he was describing going through very similar situations, if it makes you feel any better. You know, Harvard is going through no pay increases, cost reductions, hiring freezes, et cetera. So we're not alone. I know this is so hard, but just know that you're not alone.
Thank you. Director Dr. Larson.
Thanks, I'll make this quick. I just wanted to clarify some of the language in the RTD Act, not that I'm an expert, but just what I can read from it. Chris is right, it can only be up to $500,000, so that might limit it to only $30 million, and I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but it would definitely be smaller than if it was a full mill. But that, you know, the other side of that is that's a very small tax increase for property taxes. That might make it easier to do. The other thing is regarding the meat and potatoes issues. The interesting thing is the way that the RTD Act is written is that you can only do the property tax for the payment of any annual deficit, if any, in the operation and maintenance expenses of the district, which really is exactly what we're talking about right now, or at least in plain language, that's what it seems to me to be. And so, and this could, you know, possibly cover at least half of this gap. And yeah, maybe we could get fares to cover another few percentages. But I think to throw away this opportunity and to sort of treat it like it's going to be this major tax that would, you know, require this huge amount of public support, I don't think it has to be that way. I think it's a very small tax that would be used for exactly the reasons that we were given this power, and I really think we should consider it seriously.
Okay, thank you. Thank everyone for the compassion that I've had this tough discussion tonight. Just to tell people, if this is easy for you, something's the matter with you. We have a lot of choices in front of us. I, again, am suggesting that the broadest possible choices will give you the best possible answer. You want to say no to really bad ones, but to know what's really bad, you have to compare it to something. So I think the evaluation is still a focus for preparation. GMCO Johnson, I think it would be helpful if Michael Davies prepared a brief summary of what it takes generically to get an item to the ballot, going to title board, raising money, outreach campaigns, working with mayors who view the sales tax as their sacred domain, all those sorts of things that we would run into. I think it would be, we have a couple experts in this on the board, but I certainly am not. And I think it would be helpful to understand the level of effort that goes into something like that, and the time to get in front of the title board with specific language is a window that is almost closed. So if we could add that to the preparation, I think that would make it a more holistic view. It's something that we should be considered. It is something that's difficult, but not impossible. And so I think it should be considered for that. Okay, are there any other matters? Okay, all right, thank you. I'm not going to ask twice.
If I may.
Yeah, GMCO
So
Johnson.
basically, relative to where I am with leading my team, I would ask for further guidance. So relative to staff's recommendation, you don't want us to do any further work on that. What I'm garnering from your comments, that you're expecting a brief to go to the board relative to timeline, relative to any type of initiative, ballot initiative, be it property or sales and use tax, and that timeline associated with the title board.
I would look at it as a more holistic view of what it takes to get an item to a initiative process. I guess it'd be a referendum if we did it, but
Okay.
I think we need to understand what those steps are rather than just saying it's difficult or it's easy.
Okay, and then if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So relative to what we put forward, is it the board's guidance to do any further work? Because there were a lot of questions that basically germinated from the aspect of 20% or 36% in reference to a service reduction, or should we stand down relative to that not being appealing to individuals? I'm just trying to ensure that I leave this meeting with clear-cut direction as it relates to the team and what we need to do going forward.
What I heard was not a decision to not do that, but I don't think we should be focusing in on specific percentages. I think there's at 10%, 20%, 30%, you have a range of options rather than a single service reduction target right now. Because what we're looking for is, I think, with revenue options and with spending reductions, it is a holistic program of balancing the budget, not just focusing in on a single point of reduction as our only option. We don't have to reduce 20%, we could reduce 18%, or we could reduce 0%.
Understood.
And I think making this a binary choice at this point is just not appropriate for the discussion. So I'd like to see a menu of options that are considered by the board. And I think that's what I heard people willing to consider. I think there's something going to be a hard no really quick, but without knowing what they are, we have not done our due diligence as a board evaluating them, I think. So that would be my direction.
Thank you for the clarity.
We can refine that with comments back from the board too. Okay. I want to remind everyone that this did you have something, Director Rishi? Your hand was up. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, all right. Well, then, makes sound smarter. For all of you who did not get enough tonight, we have another board meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, April 28th at 5:30. That meeting will be our regularly scheduled meeting for the month of April. In addition to the items approved through our committees this month, we'll take action on the technology resolution for Vice Chair Harwick laid over in March. We'll also likely consider an action to approve a summary scope of work for an executive search firm as discussed in the Performance Committee last week. That action will occur within the context of the board meeting and not a special board. We're not gonna pull people in early again. Seeing no other discussion, the meeting is adjourned at 7:34.